Hey everyone, welcome to this design thinking video recording presentation. My name is Anna Jameson. I'm an educational technologist with Digital Flagship in the Office of Distance Education and E-Learning here at Ohio State. And before I worked at Ohio State, I was a user experience designer. So my whole career really revolved around design thinking. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it today. I know your projects have already begun and you're working in groups to solve problems for different companies, but I do want to rewind a little bit and talk a lot about design thinking, what it is, and then how we can apply some of those skills to our projects and just even in our lives. So I have this definition from the Nielsen Norman Group about design thinking. This is what it says. The design thinking ideology asserts that a hands-on, user-centric approach to problem solving can lead to innovation, and innovation can lead to differentiation and a competitive advantage. So this is kind of a jargon-filled, really techie definition of what design thinking is. And that's okay. Design thinking is often applied in the tech industry, but it's really, like this definition says, a design, or rather a problem-solving process. And I do want to reframe some of that definition just for some clarity. So when we hear the word users, which you'll probably hear a lot if you were to Google design thinking, and even in that definition on the pass screen, we really want to think about humans. Users are humans, just anyone, any person that we're around that we want to help solve a problem for. And then when we hear design, we really should think problem solving. And that's because oftentimes design gets applied to fine arts, graphic designs, building an app. But like I mentioned before, design thinking is more than that. It's a problem solving process. And in this case, design is meant to be a creative method of thinking. It doesn't just need to be applied in one area. It could be a creative solution that is found that impacts an organization that has nothing to do with technology, and that would still be design thinking. Finally, we want to make sure we're seeking understanding first. This is really at the core of what design thinking is, understanding, and then going into solutions next. That's really what differentiates design thinking from any other problem-solving method. And of course, all of this is wrapped up in a big empathy hug. We want to make sure that we're not just understanding, but that we're putting ourselves in other people's shoes. And that's because that is just the best way to make sure we're really understanding others. So you can just take a moment and rhetorically think about, how would you define design thinking? It's really helpful to put things into our own words. So I'll show you some of the ways that I define it. One is human-centered problem solving, and the other is empathetic listening. So I think the things that stand out to me the most is being human-centered, really focusing on people, and also really focusing on empathy and listening. Those are really important parts of the process. So I will be including a video on YouTube that you can watch about empathy. So you can pause this video now and go ahead and watch that, or you can watch it after this. But I want to dig more into empathy, what it is and what it isn't. So empathy is understanding and connecting with others, but it does not mean that we completely agree with them. Like I mentioned before, it requires that we put ourselves in someone else's shoes. So if we haven't experienced the same circumstance as them, we can remember a time when we thought, oh, I remember when I felt frustrated, or I remember when a process was really slow, or I felt really disappointed. It doesn't have to be the same circumstance in order for us to relate with somebody. And then when we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, that really deepens our understanding and helps us come up with more creative solutions when we're ready to do so. So, empathetic problem solving, how do we actually do that? Well, I have a few tips. One is to ask a lot of questions to gain understanding, really listen, and it's important to even ask follow-up questions. You can rephrase someone's statement to make sure you understand This is just a good life skill in general, but also really helpful in design thinking when you're talking to other people about what they might be experiencing. Rephrase what they say. Sometimes they might say, yes, you're exactly right, or they might add more details to clarify or correct you. And that will just make sure that you're understanding exactly what they want to communicate to you. Finally, talk to lots of people, not just one group of people or one type of person. Having diversity in who you talk to is going to be really important. So in the example of your assignments in solving problems for companies, perhaps talking to multiple departments would be appropriate in that scenario. So that's been a lot of information, kind of a really quick intro into empathy and design thinking. So let's check on what stage in the design thinking process we're on. We are on step 1. So I did this on purpose because I really wanted to emphasize empathy. It's really important and it really guides the rest of the process. So here's another version of that same chart. This is also from the Nielsen-Norman Group. They're experts in design thinking in the industry, and this version of it shows that it's not meant to just be a linear process, step 1 through step 5 or 6, depending on who you're asking what the definition of design thinking is. This shows that when we go to define the problem, we can move on to creating ideas, or maybe we need to go back and empathize and gain more understanding. Maybe we start to test our ideas and then we have to go back to prototyping because those tests didn't work. It is totally acceptable and really the whole heart of design thinking that we iterate and maybe go back a step or forward a step in order to really get to the right solution. And that's not failure. That is just part of the process. So I know that you've already begun working on your projects. So we're going to do a little activity related to coming up with ideas. And this is not to encourage you to change anything that you're doing in your assignment already, but really just a way that we can begin to understand more of this process and we'll practice using the problems you're already trying to solve. So just think about what problem you're trying to solve, maybe write it down in one sentence, just really quick. And I'm pretty sure you already have it defined already, so this shouldn't be too hard. And then next, we're going to come up with some ideas. So in this scenario, in your discussion boards, you can write your pie in the sky idea. This means if there were no constraints to the problem you're trying to solve at all, what would you do? This is a dream world scenario, like if money was no object, if your client totally agreed with every idea you came up with, even if technology was way more advanced, what would you do? So you can post that in the discussion board and then we can pass it on. So comment on a team member's idea and add to their dream world ideas to make it even better. What would you add? Not necessarily focusing on the negative just yet, but really just adding on and commenting on how you can make ideas even better. Finally, you can bring back those boundaries, bring back the constraints that maybe relate to budget or what is possible or your timeline. Bring those constraints back in and then think about the ideas from that first post or that first pie in the sky idea. Like, did your ideas change at all? And really, was this a way of creating ideas that was helpful for you? The whole purpose of this activity is to help us think differently and add on to one another's ideas. Sometimes when we're all talking in a group, it can be easy to focus on constraints instead of getting really creative with our solutions. And sometimes when we just take a small moment to work on our own before we connect as a group, we can see the creativity of everyone else around us, and it just helps us think outside of the box. So like I mentioned, the purpose of this activity and talk in general is not to make you change all your ideas, but I hope that it has been something that's helped you think about what design thinking is and how you could apply it to this particular problem and maybe problems in the future. If you haven't watched that empathy video, I'd encourage you to watch it now. It's really, really helpful. It's not even related to design thinking specifically. So it's just a really awesome video, and I think will really aid in your projects as you think about empathy. Thanks so much.